I gave up on expecting people to pronounce my family name when I was 5 years old. So I'm Atena Haghighattalab, which actually means I want the truth, but it's literally a sentence even in my language. I want to talk about within season grain yield prediction using spatio-temporal unmanned aerial system imagery. Grain yield is an important indicator of crops growth pattern or growth rate. Although predicting this factor requires availability to temporal data set during the growing season. On the other hand, unmanned aerial systems have the potential of providing us with high resolution, high spatial resolution, and high temporal resolution during the growing season of tens of thousands of breeding line in field. I want to talk about, I will give a brief introduction of high throughput phenotyping and its potential for crop improvement. And then I'll talk about my own research and the experimental location and the materials and methods of how we can extract meaningful information from all these raw imagery that we capture using UAS. I want to just make this note that I won't go into details because it was my previous research, but if you have any question in materials and methods of this part, please let me know or see me afterward. And after that, after we extract meaningful information from drones imagery, there are so many geostatistical approaches that we can take to predict yields, because now using drones, we're not limited to row and column numbers anymore. We have the exact coordinates of each plot in the field. And I want to show you some results of implementing this for high throughput phenotyping for within season prediction. If you think about developing a new wheat variety, it's typically a process that takes 10, 12, or 15 years. Finding the ones that have the right height, high yield, high characteristics, that the one that we currently have. This is an example of Kansas State University nursery. In this process, starting from a bulk population, in this example 300,000 plants, and going all the way to releasing a new variety, the grand challenge remains in connecting genetic variations to observed phenotype. So how can we make this process faster, and also not only faster and do it even more accurately than we phenotype in the field? And another more important factor is that how can we start with a bigger population? And this is where high throughput phenotyping comes to the picture. For high throughput phenotyping, we need to be able to develop an automated or semi-automated platforms to enable us to do the process, to do the data collection, phenotyping faster, in larger scale, and accurately. But the thing is, if you spend more time analyzing the data in the office than collecting the data in the field, this is not a high throughput phenotyping approach. So the high throughput phenotyping needs to decrease the phenotyping burden and increase the efficiency of phenotyping. Take these two pictures as an example. On the right, it's a hand measurement height in the field. You take one measurement per plot, and if you're working in a breeding nursery, I worked at Summit, Mexico. There is tens of thousands of plots. So you take one measurement per plot. You need to have multiple technicians, and each of us have different taste in how we're going to take the height measurement from where. But on the left side, you see using aerial imagery, one of the many traits that we can extract is height. And we can extract height for tens of thousands of plots. So, which brings us to the next topic that I want to talk. We take the aerial imagery, how we extract these traits, how we extract height from these images. I did my study in Summit in 2014, 15, and 16. Unfortunately, because of the visa problem, I'm Iranian. I couldn't go and do the research again this year. But my study area was at Norman Borlaug Experiment Station at Ciudad Obregón, Sonora, Mexico. In two different environments, drought and optimal irrigated environment. The genetic materials were advanced breeding lines in the LATL trials of bred wheat at Summit bred wheat breeding program. The experiment consisted of 280 advanced wheat lines with 3 replicates in 10 trials. The platform that I used for this study is IRIS Plus, is a very low-cost quadricopter UAV, and I used the open source Pixel autopilot system to program for automatic navigation for the IRIS Plus. The mechanical engineers at Kansas State University designed a gimbal specifically for this IRIS Plus to compensate for the UAV movement, pitch, and roll. So we always make sure that we have a native view toward our plots. The camera that I use, again, very low cost consumer camera, Canon S100 that was customized to blue, green, and near infrared. And I use the CHDK to automate Canon S100's functionality by running an intervalometer script off an SD card, so I could take images in intervals, be it every 4 seconds or every 4 meters during the flight. The image processing pipeline, the following diagram shows the details how we process the raw imagery that we collect from the UAV. The steps are, the first step is pre-processing. We have raw imagery, we have ground control points, and we pre-process the images. We generate digital elevation model and orthomosaic. The next step is radiometrically calibrating all these images, so we can assess, we can evaluate the patterns of growth in temporal data sets. So account for the changes that happens each day, within a day, and also between each day of data collection. The next step is to make a map of vegetation indices and also extract height information from the images. And the most important step is, how do we get plot level information? I did several methods. I used simple grid, just overlay the simple grid on top of it, which was very fast, not accurate. I did image classification, segmentation of the image, classifying the images, segmenting, very accurate method, not fast, because still you need to do some post-processing. And the third method is field map-based method, the way that I never thought about it, because all the breeders have a field map that has all the information. It has row, column information, it has plot ID, entry ID, GID. The point was, and on the other hand, we know what is the plot size. We know, for example, each plot is 1.2 meter by 0.8. For example, my irrigation plot was, and plants were planted like that. So we know the plot size. Using drones, we know the exact coordinates. So we just convert this field map using the coordinates that we have, using the previous knowledge that we have about plot, and just converted it to using GIS science, converted it to KML and converted it to polygons. Very fast, very accurate, and it's in Python, and I have it on GitHub. So we extract plot level statistics, which is vegetation indices and height information. This is just to show you an example of the orthomosaic image. After collecting hundreds of images, this is what we have at the end. And if we, after calibrating, radiometrically calibrating this image, we can generate different vegetation indices. Now, here is just an example of one of the vegetation indices that we can create. Green NDVI, it's the same as NDVI that almost everybody knows. We just replace the green band instead of red band. After creating vegetation indices, another very important trait that we can extract is height. The program generates point clouds, dense point clouds, based on the estimated camera positions, and also calculates depth information for each photo. So we can combine the depth information with the dense point cloud, with the information that we have for each pixel in the images, and generate a digital elevation model. Another method that I take in this step is classify the digital elevation model that we have. Because in the points, in the images, you see everything. You see plants, you see shadow, you see soil, you see noises, rocks. You have high point noises, low point noises. So if you classify this huge dense point cloud to only soils, then you have digital terrain model. And if you classify and just remove all the noises and use all the points, soil and crop and everything, you have digital surface model. The difference between your digital surface model and digital terrain model will give you the height of the plant. So this is how the polygons look, and as I told you, it's very fast, very accurate. As you can see, we can buffer it to exactly get the middle of the plant plot, so avoid the border effect. And each polygon gives you a plot ID, entry ID, GID, row, column, and the exact coordinates of each plot. So now that we have meaningful information for each plot in our field, next step is to evaluate the use of drones, the use of unmanned aerial systems for yield prediction. Now we have coordinates. One of the many geostatistical models and approaches that we can take is geographically weighted regression model, and that's why I focused in this study. And why geographically weighted regression? Plant breeding trials are inherently spatial in nature, and they vary across the field. And if we want to develop any prediction model, we have to take this into account. The foundation of geostatistical approaches, on the other hand, is the understanding that spatial data and the relationship between them, which is stored as coordinate and topology, varies across the field. But ordinary regression models just ignore these facts. Ordinary regression, when we apply it to spatial data, assumes a stationary spatial process. What does it mean is that the same stimulus provokes the same response all over the study area, which we know cannot be the case in breeding nurseries with hundreds of different genotypes planted. So that made me to think about geographically weighted regression models. So look at the equation number 1. In equation number 1, the coefficients, betas, are in the model are global estimates. So the same everywhere in the field. But geographically weighted regression is not a global regression model. It's a local and statistical approach. Geographically weighted regression, or GWR, is used when the extent of a relationship among variables differs from location to location. GWR applies a spatial weighting function, and this spatial weighting function moves from one plot to another and applies a regression only at that local space. And it's based on Tobler's first law of geography. Very simple. Everything is related to everything else, but closer things are more related. Now look at the equation number 2. It allows the relationship to vary over space and extends the traditional regression equation number 1 by allowing local variations in the rates of change. So the coefficients in the model are no longer global estimates, but they're specific to location I. So betas are based on location I now. This weighting functions can be adaptive. What does it mean? You can determine the optimal bandwidth or the optimal number of nearest neighbors. The adaptive schemes adjust themselves based on how dense your data is, the density of the data. If you have very dense, the bandwidth is shorter, or if the data is sparse, the bandwidth is larger. So it changes. Even your regression and your weighting model it changes all over your field. Whether the bandwidth is short or it's large, it doesn't matter. We still will account for the optimal bandwidth, and we selected it by internal cross-fold validation. So here I want to show you some results that we applied this. If you look at this, the first row, the graphs on top, are green NDVI values for March 10, 15, and April 8 for irrigated environment. And the one at the bottom are green NDVI values for March 2nd, 10, and March 14 of the drought environment. The index on the right side shows you the range of green NDVI. So the blue is the lowest, and then up to yellow is the highest NDVI, green NDVI values. You can see in each time set, GNDVI values show spatial variation across the field. This leads to developing a geographically weighted model to explore the changing spatial relationships between yield and measured phenotypic traits. It can be any different vegetation indices, or it can be any trait. Here is the comparison between principal component regression model versus geographically weighted regression. On the left, you see the graph of correlation between observed yield versus predicted yield. Using the estimated blues and tenfold cross-validation, the correlation between the predicted yield and observed yield, take drought environment as an example, is 0.48, and then for irrigated is 0.32. I also obtained these accuracies for GWR, geographically weighted regression, and for both environments using tenfold cross-validation technique. The average correlation, if you look for GWR for a drought environment, it increased to 0.74, and for irrigated environment, it increased 0.46. And that's not the only thing that we achieve from here. Not only we have higher prediction accuracies, but also if you look at the root mean square error, the root mean square error from for drought environment from 0.39 for PCR decreased to 0.14, and for irrigated from 0.36 decreased to 0.2. As a summary, vegetation indices and height, first of all, we can drive this information for each plot for the breeding nursery for our field. And these traits have high correlation with yield, 0.74 for vegetation, for drought environment, and 0.46 for irrigated environment. I use all the temporal data set, all the different vegetation indices plus heights, and put it in the model. The RMSE also decreased for both environments, drought and irrigated environment. And we can conclude that data collected from high throughput phenotyping and using drones, using UAS imagery, can be used to predict grain yield. And now I would like to thank Plant Lab. I'm a postdoc at Plant Lab working with Jesse Plant, and this is a work that cannot be done without having an interdisciplinary program. I work with breeders and computer programmers. I'm an engineer. I'm a photogrammetric and remote sensing engineer, but without the insights of having the other team members, this work cannot be done. And I would like to our collaborators at Summit, Dr. Ravi Singh, Dr. Mandal, and the technician that helped me with collecting the data and validating the data set by having ground control points, Lorena Gonzalez Press, and without, of course, without having the help of the funding agencies, NSF and USAID, it wouldn't be possible. And I just want to show you a picture that I still being an engineer, I try to be melted to plant breeding, and I love this field. And I'll take any questions now.
I have one simple question. You have three methods to extract the plot level data and the simple grid and field map base. So I'm curious about the third one. It is a combination of simple grid and image classification, or it is so what kind of way is it?
So here you can see the grid base is like a fishnet. You create a grid and you try to overlay it on top of your images. So the grids cannot be accurate because even if you design you design it based on the information that you have from what is the size of the grid, how many plots you have, but still it won't be accurate. Another thing that both the grid-based and image processing lag is that you still would have another step, two other steps. First would be post-processing. For example, for grid, you need to post-process it and adjust it on top of your image. For the image classification one, if you look, if plants are growing toward each other, they are merged together and it's assigned as one plot. So you still need to do post-processing, one thing. And the second thing is that you still need to bring all the information that breeders have, like plot ID, entry ID, GID. So it's like 2 steps. But the experimental field design is not image classification, it's not a grid. It's a separate method. So you have the field map, right? You have the field map with, your field map has the plot ID in it, and it tells you what is the entry ID and everything else. What you do, you go to the image. It's a Python code that I wrote. You go to the image and you just click on the first plot and the last plot and get the coordinates of these two. It's coordinate based. So you get the coordinate of first plot, the point that plot starts. So a plot is like 4 corners. So you get the first corner on the left, and the last plot, you get the last corner on the right. So first one and last one, and you know what is the size of the plot. So the program starts from creating plots from the first point that you selected, knows what is the exact size of this polygon, knows what is the rows, because these are the information that you have. Why not just use it? You know what is the gap between each plot. You give it to the program, starts building polygons, goes all the way to the right, finishes, comes back, and just like skims and makes all the plots and goes to the last coordinate that you introduced to it. So it's a coordinate based using the information that breeder already has. Yes, please.
The next presentation, I have a question about, I like the idea that the relation between, let's say, the trade field and an index may vary between locations and genotype location combinations. So we have a sort of a random regression setting. So that type of model will give you a regression equation for possible location genotype combinations. How do you envision yourself applying this for prediction of field, let's say in a future season? So I have calculated my model, and in the next season I have different combinations. Right? So, exactly. And I don't have data to train those regression coefficients. So how do you see the application of this random regression type methods in that particular context?
It's a very good question, because that's exactly what I'm working on right now. And another grant, NEFA, is yield prediction modeling. So this method has very advantages, but disadvantages is that am I going to be able to apply this in another location? Everything that I'm getting from my GWR is, for example, for drought, for this exact location in Summit, Mexico. Am I going to be able to apply this for Summit in India, or am I going to be applied for breeding here in Iowa State? So these are the challenges that I'm working on. I don't have the answer to your question now, but hopefully in the near future.
So to go back to the first question. For the field base and in the middle row, right?
Yes, exactly.
Can you like handle like it's not perfect field shape, and like the right line is perfect like a triangle, but horizontally, vertically, and if I like the plot like to go this way, it can be line shape. Can you handle that situation?
Yes, yeah. If you know the information, if you know that's how you planted the plots, yes, you can just, it's a mix of geometry and the coordinates that you get and the information that breeders have. So if you know the information, you can just train your program, train your script to do so. It's very fast, and I developed it for the trials in Summit, Mexico, but we are using it in other locations, which have different experimental designs. Sure.
Okay, thank you very much. Let's thank Atena and